2 minutes and 2 minutes.
Remarkable. A year ago, Andrew Guerin sadly passed away. I want to take this opportunity to express my condolences to the Guerin's family. But 1 year on, and his family are still waiting for an inquest they feel that would help them move forward with their grief. His brother Evan contacted me, very upset and frustrated at the length of time the family are waiting for an inquest. Unfortunately, there are too many families like the Guerins in Cork. This is not the fault of the coroner or his staff, who don't Trojan work despite being under-resourced and understaffed. Cork Coroner's Court deals with a quarter of the cases Dublin City Coroner deals with, and yet has only 2 staff compared to Dublin's 24. The courtroom that they used pre-COVID is now offices to facilitate social distancing, and the coroner has to fit in inquests where he can. Without proper funding, the coroner cannot do his job, and families like the Guerins are left waiting. Surely, Minister, you can recognise that a role you have to play in this. Margaret.
Minister, when somebody dies in tragic circumstances, or however they die, that it requires an inquest, that inquest is part of the process of healing and recovering afterwards, and grieving. And obviously, you know, they're complex and it's not possible to do it straight away, but it's not reasonable. It's not reasonable to expect families to wait a year and more for such an inquest, particularly when there are maybe unanswered questions, when there may be so much that they want to know, when there's a need for closure. And that is what the inquest is about. And I've been contacted by families who have been waiting a very significant period of time, including the Guerins, who Deputy Gould eloquently outlined their situation. And it's heartbreaking, to be honest, Minister. The other thing is that it affects our understanding as policymakers. It slows down our ability to gather statistics on suicides, for example. Indeed, there's a wider issue about the inconsistency of how numbers in relation to suicides are compiled in relation to coroner's reports. But it slows down that. It slows down, the ability to compile statistics around accidents and other things like that. This is all slowed down by the fact that the coroner's court is facing such delays. But they are not without importance. But the key issue here is the fact that you have families waiting a year and more to find out what happened to their loved one, to find questions, to find answers to so many of the questions that they have. And I think that is not remotely good enough. Deputy Gould outlined it. A quarter of the cases that Dublin handles, and I think 1/12 of the staff. How can they possibly keep up? It's not their fault. They don't have the resources. They need far greater resources to deal with these inquests.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Deputy Gould and Deputy O'Leary for raising this very important matter this evening, and for giving me the opportunity to provide clarity on some issues. The Coroner's Service comprises the network of coroners located in districts throughout the country. Coroners are independent and quasi-judicial office holders whose core function is to investigate sudden and unexplained deaths so that a death certificate can be issued. This is an important public service to the living, and in particular to the next of kin and friends of the deceased. Coroners not only provide closure for those who are bereaved, but also perform, as Deputy has said, a wider public service by identifying matters of public health and safety concerns. The timing and the conduct of inquests in any district is a matter entirely for the coroner concerned, and neither I nor my department have any function in this regard. Most coroners hold inquests in local courthouses, and as a result of COVID-19 public health considerations, inquests have unfortunately been severely curtailed. My department is aware that the delay in holding inquests is causing distress for families, and officials from my department are liaising with the court service on this matter. The court service works closely with coroners across the country to facilitate inquests and continue to do so while ensuring adherence to public health guidelines.
Dr. Gould.
Good Minister, but we know the coroner is independent. We're not asking about that. What we're asking is that there would be fund, resourced and staffed to deal with the work they have to do. The coroner's job is a very serious job and a very difficult job. And what the Minister has outlined there about the role of the coroner, Minister, I'm asking what's your role and your department's role, not in the coroner's work, but in the coroner's support with funding and staffing issues. So that's what I'm asking you here tonight. Minister, the families, they must be supported, especially in this time of need, and not be left waiting months and even over a year for a court date. It's simply not good enough. And what we're asking, Minister, we know there have been a lot of issues and a lot of delays because of COVID. I'm asking now, will you give a commitment to provide the resources necessary to clear the backlog for the market?
Minister, I suppose I've done a fair few topical issues since I was elected to TD 5 years ago. I think that's one of the shortest responses, the printed responses I've ever seen. I think that's a desperate response. Minister, I can see from your face and from the way you're speaking that you're sympathetic, that you understand the problem here. I know you didn't write this, that officials in the Department of Justice would have had input to this. I would ask you to have a word with them. This is not a good enough response. This is not a good enough response for us to go back to those families with. Because we know, and you know as well, we're not asking you or the department and your colleague, Minister Humphreys, to intervene with the coroners and say, listen, you need to hurry up here. That's not the issue. Your department appoints the coroners. There's 2 in Cork, 24 in Dublin, quarter of the cases. They cannot keep up. How could they possibly keep up? Well, Minister, as I say, I believe you're sympathetic, and I would ask you, please go back to your department and say this is not a good enough situation.
Thank you.
They need more in Cork, and to please work on that. Thank you.
Thank you, deputies. And look, I understand the frustration and the pain of many families, and I do empathise with what your concerns here tonight, Deputy. And again, I just have to reiterate that I do have no role in the timing and the conduct of the inquests, and that it's strictly a matter for the coroner concerned. But I will say that in relation to, I suppose, the specific concerns in relation to Cork, as I've said, the court service work closely with the coroners across the country to facilitate inquests, and they continue to do so, ensuring that they adhere to public health. But what I will do is ask my officials to liaise kind of bilaterally with yourselves in relation to these specific concerns in that area in particular. Thank you.